Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm so excited about the interview we have today. Is this wonderful woman who has written this fabulous book, and let me just tell you a bit about her. Janet Ettele is the author of How Joyous Effort Works and three other insightful books that blend timeless wisdom with modern day practicality. Also an accomplished musician, Janet draws from her deep understanding of Buddhist philosophy and the arts to create accessible and inspiring works that encourage personal growth, compassion, and mindfulness. Her writing and music help readers navigate life's challenges with clarity, resilience, and a sense of joy, empowering them to cultivate a life of purpose and balance. So, welcome to the show, Janet.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's start with your book, How Joyous Effort Works. Tell us about it. What's your book about?
How Joyous Effort Works is a parable, basically. It's a story that we use to illustrate uh, like the archetypal character of someone, that in this case, it's a young man who's really struggled with a lot of things in his life. The pain of his parents' divorce, excessive drinking, some drug use, and a really bad temper where he's gotten into fights and has had a really painful time. And he gets basically sent out of college to go home. And at that time, he realizes he's in so much pain. He happens to come across, as one hopefully does, the right person or the right people who help guide him into a path where he starts to really bring himself out of his own darkness into a period of his life where he's really growing spiritually. And in How Joyous Effort Works, he meets the archetypal sage character who is a man named Jules. And Jules is someone who builds and repairs stringed instruments. It's called a luthier. And he has this beautiful studio where Troy goes and spends time with him. And Troy is the name of the young man, by the way. Uh, and he uses the luthier's skills as a metaphor for helping to demonstrate certain practices and to provide meditative support. And so we follow Troy's journey through this series of meetings with him, which are each one is a lesson. And he has the opportunity to put it into practice. And I won't say what happens, but it's a pretty crucial moment where he could either really lose all the momentum he's achieved, or he could triumph and really change the course of everything for himself.
So the book is filled with lots of spiritual teachings, that kind of thing, lessons.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely,
And
yes.
then given that you've written this and that you're a musician, etc., I assume, but I will ask you, that you take these spiritual teachings in your own life. And if that's the case, then how can the rest of us do the same? How do we do that?
That's a really good question, and it's multifaceted, but if I were to simplify it down to one, like for a first step, would be meditation.
Mm.
And I would say that I was well primed for meditation because when I was 15, my parents had divorced and sent me away to a Quaker boarding school in New
Mm.
Hampshire. And if you know anything about the Quakers, silence is a really big part of their tradition. And I found that with everything that was going on in my life, all the turmoil and everything else, that silence became something really grounding for me.
Mm.
And it was something that, even though I wasn't thinking about meditation, I don't even know if I knew about meditation, it became something that I was very drawn to. So many, many years later, when I'd say it was about 18 years ago, I had come across a book that had a lot of references to Buddhism. And I became very interested and very curious to learn more. And, the things I was reading were talking about the importance of a meditation practice. But at this time, I was raising my sons on my own, and I was used to being always busy, always needing to be productive. And it was very hard for me to just say, oh, I'm just going to sit and meditate. So, what I was someone that chronic, or I decided, oh, I can accomplish two things at the same time. I can meditate. You know, those old-fashioned camping percolators,
Yes.
coffee percolators?
Yes.
Yeah. I would fill that up, put the water, the coffee, put it on the stove and turn it on. And then I would go sit on my couch and try to meditate. And as long as I knew something was being accomplished, the coffee was making itself, essentially. I would do that until the coffee smelled done. And then that was the end of it for me.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it
But
really worked.
well, I'm sure because most people, and I talk to others also who say, I can't meditate because my mind just won't shut up. And there are lots of people who can't sleep at night because they can't stop this noise going on. So
Oh
you
my
found a
God.
way to do it. Do you have other tips along those lines?
Well, I will say, I will add to that that it takes over the years that capacity to sit, and my children have grown and left the house, and my ability to sit has improved. It's like anything we do in life. The more we do it, the more accustomed we become, the more we recognize the value, the benefit that we receive from it, and then the more, we're able to grow with that. Um,
So you don't have any magic bullet here. You're just going to tell us we have to practice.
I will say that without meditation, it's very hard to not, because what are you practicing?
Yeah.
And we have to, one of the things, what meditation is essentially a way of familiarizing your mind to something.
Hmm.
For most of us, we say, oh, I can't sit and meditate because there's so much going on in my mind. I'm too distracted. That is our very wild and uncontrolled, unconscious meditation that we're doing over and over and over again, which is what we're
Hmm.
familiarizing our mind to, which is why we can never seem to get out of our own way sometimes.
Hmm. That makes sense.
And
That makes
so,
sense.
yeah, and what happens, it's sort of like if you've ever been in a noisy place and all of a sudden, like loud music or something, and when all that dies down and it's quiet, all of a sudden you can hear the dripping faucet, you can hear the squeaks in the floorboards or the birds outside or the wind or whatever. You can start to hear that. That's been going on all the time anyway. You just couldn't hear it. And that's essentially what meditation does. It helps you quiet your mind so you actually are aware of what's happening. And you learn in the process of this is you learn to say, okay, there's a thought. It's just a thought, and let it go. There's a lot of teachers that talk about see those thoughts like a cloud that just sort of dissipates in the blue sky.
Yeah, and when
Um,
you start watching those thoughts, you can realize how many crazy thoughts you actually may have. Or maybe I'm just speaking of myself. Actually, I love meditation, so and I love the description you just gave. I think that's about there's all this going on underneath, but because of all the noise, you can't even really hear it. So the whole idea is to get to a point where you can start hearing those other things, which is
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
What does this have to do with mindfulness? Is there a difference between mindfulness and meditation?
So through meditation, we cultivate mindfulness.
Okay.
Right? It helps us, and mindfulness is really important. Um, and I know mindfulness is a word that we hear tossed around a lot, and so my way of understanding and trying to explain mindfulness is to say it's like awareness with an accurate understanding of a situation or just in life in general, how things function, how things exist. And this is something a lot of times we are taught to understand, the impermanent nature of things, for instance. And we learn to not like concretize something, whether it's a feeling or an experience that's happening in the moment. Through mindfulness, we can remind ourselves this is a moment, it's going to pass. And we calm ourselves down with mindfulness. It helps us to be more present in the moment, more grounded, and thereby respond to whatever the situation is at hand with much more clarity, much more wisdom, and the greater likelihood of creating a more peaceful outcome, a more beneficial outcome to whatever the
So,
situation may be.
so responding rather than instantly reacting, which is more out of your conditioning.
Exactly,
That,
that
yeah.
that what we've been familiarizing our minds
Hmm.
to for decades.
What is it? How Is it, how important is it for us to become aware of our true motivations with regard to whatever we're doing?
So I think that's really important. It's often said, know the why of what you're doing, because that really helps you to streamline your purpose. It also helps you to examine, what are my motivations? Is this something that, could bring harm to somebody else, or maybe out of my own greed, or something could actually have a bad downside at the other end, ideally, the best motivation is one that brings tremendous value and benefit. And this is how we really, I think, for most people, feel the meaning in our lives. Whether it's you're going to work because you're taking care of a family that you love and you want to see your children or your spouse really be happy, that's a beautiful motivation. It doesn't always have to be on, I'm going to save the planet, which is a
You hear
great
that one a lot
motivation
too.
too.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
that?
You hear that one a lot too.
Right. We want
You
to
know,
save,
I
but
want to
we
say
can only do our small part, right?
it's really true. It's really
Yeah.
true. I was thinking as you were speaking about how kind of shocking some motivations can be. You know, when you realize a motivation behind something that you just it was unconscious and it bubbles up and you see it and you go, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And
It is.
then it seems like there's a kind of a natural flow into a better way, to handle something.
I think so. I think so. And I think also when we have a motivation that we really clearly can see the value and the benefit of something, we're really pumped. We're excited. We've got some enthusiasm to sort of propel us, which is basically what how joyous effort is about, having that recognizing the value of it does take work and practice and diligence to do anything of worth that's worthwhile. But when you can see what that value is, you're energized. It helps you to overcome the difficult points along the way.
Interesting you mentioned that because life is filled with obstacles and challenges. I mean, there's it just is. This is how it is here.
It sure.
So, so how do we're going to run into things. So how do we take those and turn them into something positive or that works for us? And maybe you can give us an example in your own life where you've taken a true obstacle and made it into something that was really beautiful.
You know, I think there are a lot of ways, perhaps, but yeah, I would say the first one that comes to mind for me is when my sons were, one had just turned 6 and my other one wasn't even 4 yet. Um, the marriage ended, my marriage ended.
Mm.
And it was the last thing in the world I wanted was to raise my children in divorce. And based on my own experience. And so that was a big obstacle for me to have to like,
Yeah.
how am I going to do this? I've got these 2 little boys and how am I going to raise them? I have no family around
Mm.
and no family of my own, I should say. And I had a friend who gave me the best words ever. And he said, your children will take their cues from you. If they see you doing well, then they'll do well. And that became like my mantra. And, to just like, that gave me so much strength
Mm.
to go by. It's like my purpose was to give them a stable home, a stable life, to make sure that they felt that coming home to this house was like their sanctuary, a place where they could be safe. And now, all these years later, I can look back on that motivation and recognize that's also sort of the Buddhist philosophical view is we seek to benefit others. And that's such a stronger place to be coming from than always like trying to take care of only ourselves. We don't want to hurt ourselves or bring harm to ourselves, of course, but when we have that motivation, it also is very energizing.
It sounds as though because you had this need to show your children a better, positive way, it kind of forced you, and that might be the wrong word, but forced you to have to watch your own mind and meditate and get your own self in order so that you really could be that for them. Is that the case?
It's true. I wish I had discovered those books and started meditating much sooner. I think I
Mm,
would have been much better. So it was hard. I won't lie. It was very difficult times. But that started to turn around once I did discover these Buddhist teachings, for instance. And I'm there are many spiritual paths. Buddhism isn't like the only spiritual path that helps give people meaning and something to draw strength from. But it's interesting because in how joyous effort works, that's actually one of the concerns that Troy is having is he really wants to be able to he's seeing the value of this practice that he's learning, the Buddhist teachings. And he also wants to have a regular life. He wants to have a career. He'd love to marry and have children. And can you do it all? Can you do both in a balanced way? And this is what one of the things that Jules teaches him and guides him to his own understanding. I think that's one of the things in Buddhism too. It's never like, oh, this is the way and do it because I've said so. It's always, it says, investigate, try this out for yourself, test it for yourself. Does it hold up? There's
mhm,
like that famous Buddhist saying, don't mistake my finger for being the moon. It is because
mhm.
of my finger that you can see the moon.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And really, all spiritual traditions are basically pointing at the same thing, even though they might argue about it, you know. You don't believe what I believe. There's all that human stuff going on, but they really are all pointing towards the same thing. How you get there
Absolutely.
is your own path, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one thing we all need to be respectful of is that,
Mm-hmm.
let people have the path that speaks to them, to their
Mm-hmm.
heart.
Yeah. So this is the fourth in a series, right? How Joyous
Mhm.
Effort Works. There are three
Yeah.
other books. Tell us what's the theme behind all of them? We could maybe guess, but I'd love to hear. And what are each of the books?
So, well, the theme is because we follow Troy from the first through the fourth.
Ah,
The theme is when the student is ready, the master appears. And
hmm.
in each book, Troy meets a new sage character, a new teacher.
Oh,
And his practice develops along the way. And as the readers, we get that opportunity to hear or read the same things he's learning, be a little bit in his mind as he's processing and trying to evaluate and work with these things. And we have the chance to then, by doing that, we're like the fly on the wall, and we get to sort of apply it to our own lives as well, if we choose to. Each of these books is based on a teaching by 8th century Buddhist monk and scholar, Master Shantideva, who gave the teaching called on the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life.
Hmm.
And that is also commonly known as the six perfections. So the first perfection is generosity. And so that book is how generosity works. The second is moral and ethical discipline. And because moral and ethical discipline is the root of kindness, we decided to title that book How the Root of Kindness Works. The
Okay.
third book is on patience. And patience, we don't mean just like gritting your teeth and suffering inside and being looking patient on the outside, but it's an actual shift in your mind. Again, this is a mindfulness practice to be able to look at a situation and come at it with more compassion, for instance, more wisdom, and so that book is called How Patience Works. And they've each been written in such a way that you don't have to read them in any order. They can be picked, each is like a standalone book, but that does follow the same Troy from the beginning to
Oh, I
the end.
love that. And I always love when there's more than one book, especially if I love one book, I want to read more. And I know I'm not alone in that. How did you
Yeah.
get the Dalai Lama to do the foreword?
Oh my God.
How did you do that?
That was just when I saw that he accepted and agreed to do it, and then I received it with his letterhead and his signature on it. I,
Oh,
I
I can't even imagine.
it was unbelievable. But one of my teachers has a friend that works at the office of the Dalai Lama, and he's
Ah,
closely connected. He's a Tibetan geshe, a monk who was, it's sort of like having a PhD here in the West,
Mm.
very rigorous kind of study and process. And so anyway, he has had a friend and gave me the name of the person that was responsible. And I wrote the email and provided the background, and I got a response that, we'll have to evaluate this information. They had to evaluate it and
Of
make sure it
course.
was okay.
Yes, of
And
course.
then I received it. So that's how that happened.
Well, how long did it take from when you first wrote the email to the email where they said we have to evaluate this? How long did you wait?
Oh, that happened pretty quickly.
Really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah.
Oh, you must have been jumping for joy. Ooh,
I was.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's
I
great.
still am. Yeah. It's an honor.
Is there anything that you would like to add here that we haven't covered yet that we should know
Um,
about?
I'm drawing a blank right now, but
Put you on the spot.
yeah, you did. Yeah.
Okay, well, that means we covered a lot. So it was really a joy. Thank you for joining us, Janet. It was great. And how Joyous Effort Works. Everybody should pick up a copy of this. We'll have it in the show notes. And congratulations and good luck with the book.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and thank you for inviting me today.
You bet.